Good evening, this is VK3SL testing on 160 metres and 2 metres. We're back on board. We've had quite a break. It was actually good to have a break. In fact, when we came back, it was a bit disorienting coming back here and seeing all this stuff. Yes, being apart from it for a while is, it does put things into perspective a little bit. Lots of stuff everywhere. Never the mind, we have to operate within our means and our expectations and our mad psychology. Anyhow, back on board, and we're trying things out tonight, trying different things out. We've got a new voice processor, a new compressor arrangement. So trying that out tonight. We installed it this afternoon. Haven't done comprehensive tests yet, so it's all sort of in process, I suppose, processing of the processor, and we'll monitor things as we go. Now it's got two settings. It's got a speech setting, and if I push this, it's in front of me. If I push this, we've got there's the music setting there. So I don't know if that makes any comprehensible difference. I'll go back to speech. There we go. That's back on speech again. So we'll see what happens, but the aim is to make things a little bit more robust, a bit more professional. It's all the grand art of delusion here at VK3SL. And the only other thing is, I notice we're not putting out that much power tonight. It's only about 70 watts. I think there may be some disarray with the antenna system. I'll have to check it out. Hasn't been tested since we returned, so we'll have to monitor things. Fine into the dummy load, but there is a bit of a mismatch. So we'll see how the transmitter handles all of that. All right, well, I don't think I will start with the 20s one. I've got 3 or 4 options in front of me right here. Where do I go? I'm going to take a leap of faith, and I think we will go Japanese.
南の国歌の国太鼓を打て拍子を取れ楽しき今宵南の星十字星愛しの瞳に似て輝ける愛の光今宵もあの空に高く響け思い出の懐かしのボレロよ思いを込め高らかに太鼓を打て拍子を取れ楽しき今宵南の花赤いバラ優しき人の胸に愛の印高く香る情けを風に乗せ遠く送る思い出の懐かしのボレロよ
This is VK3SL, we're going Japanese. Listening to a Japanese Victor record from the 1930s. No idea what that's about or what's on it. We can bring it up to the microphone and have a look, but I don't think I'm going to have a hope of reading this label. Not at all. All I can see is made by the Nippon Columbia Company Limited, Kawasaki, Japan. So I turn it over. What's on the other side? It's all Japanese. So we'll play the other side, see what's here. Record on, fade up. Oh, I recognise this. This is familiar territory. I think we'll go with this, although we have played it a lot of times. VK3SL. 'Oh, how good it is to hear that again. Yes, haven't heard it for a few weeks, months. And that's a part of the Japanese stash. There's a pile of Japanese records here. I really have no idea what's on them. And they sort of get mixed up because I play them and then they go back into the pile and I don't really have no idea what I played. There's no easy way for me to identify them. But they're great, aren't they? I love it. Oh, Japanese music. That's Japanese Butterfly, of course. There's another one. Have a look at this one here. It's got a horse and a warrior on the label. And again, it says Nippon Nara Tekahoru Takahi something, KK. And the rest of it's all in Japanese. I have no idea. Don't even know what the label is on this one. But I reckon it's worth a go. I'm feeling in a Japanese mood now. I wasn't going to play any Japanese music tonight, but it's funny how things just sort of become apparent. All right, well, pop this one on. See what this is like. Wonder if it's in the minor key as well. VK3SL.
シャンデリア狭い銀座の黄昏も二人歩けば夢のその恋の夜恋の夜胸もあふるるあの声は若い命のセレナで知っているなら教えてよ恋の手札のエビ恋の夜恋の夜庭のツバメが飛ぶように愛しいあなたに抱かれて紅のドレスで踊るよは濡れる素肌の恥ずかしさ恋の夜恋の夜
Okay, no idea what that was. Sounds very focused, doesn't it? I just realised that was playing simultaneously through the noise reduction system. I'm interested to know. That's quite a scratchy record. I wonder how that'll sound if I swap systems over. Now, here we go. It's playing now through a parallel arrangement. This is with noise reduction.庭のツバメが飛ぶように愛しいあなたに抱かれて紅のドレスで踊るよは濡れる素肌の恥ずかしさ恋の夜恋の夜 Yeah, it seems to work quite well, although it does dull the recording a bit, I think. Yeah, the best way to handle noise reduction is to use the magnetic pickup, of course, so we might give that a whirl, I think. It's good to sort of switch different systems in here. It's all a part of a grand scheme to experiment and try things out and partake in this grand delusion of being a DJ. And what have we got? Another pile of records skimming through an HMV from 1926 I wasn't going to play any 20s records, but this one looks pretty cool. This is Nat Schildkrit and his orchestra. So we'll jump ahead and I'll go to the big table here, the big buyer. Yeah, something like a smaller record on a big buyer. There's something very majestic. Yes, the buyer and the magnetic pickup. And I think everything's switched in. There we go. And this is our other noise. This is the preferred noise reduction system. This is looking at this record, it is in terrible condition. I've never played it. It has been steeled to Billy-O. It's full of, all the grooves have gone white and crazed. So we'll see what happens when we put the pickup on. This is a test. And we have no prior experience here. Whoops, there we go. VK3SL testing.
Coming down the street, now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she sweet, ain't she nice? Look her over once or twice, I ask you very confidentially, ain't she nice? Just cast an eye in her direction, for me or mine, ain't that perfection? I repeat, now don't you think that's kind of neat? And I ask you very confidentially, ain't that baby nice?
Well, that certainly is quintessentially 1920s. It's got all the hallmarks. Very stereotypical example. Mid-20s. And all that syncopation, the drive, the intermod distortion. That's a part of the signature, I think, is all that intermod. Now, what's on the other side? Paul Whiteman at his orchestra, Muddy Water. This is one of Bing's first. Yes, 1926, I think he recorded this. Oh, I should put it on. It gets in pretty bad nick, but I think it'll play okay. And an early Bingle Boy, when he was sort of more jazz inclined before he sort of became really commercial and boring. But his early jazz recordings, I think, are wonderful. So I know this one. And I wasn't aware that I had another copy of it here. So let's get cracking. Let's have a listen to Muddy Water. This is a terrific record, but we'll see what condition it's in. VK3SL, we're testing here on 160 and 2 meters, trying out new processing equipment, hoping the signal cuts through.
Muddy water round my feet, muddy water in the street. Just God's own shelter down on the delta. Muddy water in my shoes, rocking to those low down blues. They live in ease and comfort down there, I declare. Been away a year today to wander and roam. I don't care, it's muddy there, but still it's my home. Got my toes turned Dixie way, round that delta let me lay. My heart cries out for muddy water.
Well, there we go. That's an early Bing when he was very jazz inclined, and pleased to have found that. It came out of nowhere. Actually, it might have been in Mr. J's stash. Oh, it's good to hear. Wow, Muddy Water, Bing Crosby. Now, I've got another Crosby on the turntablium, and this one is for someone who's listening who knows who they are and will enjoy this. Wouldn't be my first preference. I'm not sort of into Crosby's later commercial stuff, but this song will have a very strong appeal to one of the listeners, so we'll have to give it a whirl. VK3SL testing.
Oh, baby mine, I get so lonely when I dream about you. Can't do without you, that's why I dream about you. If I could only put my arms about you, life would be so fair. If you were there, I'd sit and look at you and never tire. No, never tire. You are my one desire. I get so lonely when I dream about you. Why can't you be there?
Tossing and turning in my slumber, holding you it seems. I give you kisses without number, but only in my dreams.
Oh, baby mine, I get so lonely when I dream about you. Can't do without you, that's why I dream about you. If I could only put my arms about you, life would be so fair.
Slumber, holding you it seems. I give you kisses without number, but only in my dreams.
Oh, baby mine, I get so lonely when I dream about you. Can't do without you, that's why I dream about you. If I could only put my arms about you, life would be so fair. Oh, baby, my life would be so fair. Oh, baby, my life would be so fair.
There we go, Mr. B. Now, that was with the noise reduction. I reckon that record, I won't play it all, let's play a bit, will sound better without the noise reduction. It just sounded muffle missions to me. This is it raw. Sounds much better, doesn't it? I'll wait for Mr. B to come back. With his 44BX RCA microphone natural resonance, you can hear he's exploiting that resonance peak.
Oh, baby mine, I get so lonely when I dream about you. Can't do without you. That's why I dream about you. If I could only put my arms about you, life would be so fair. Oh, baby, my life would be so fair. Oh, baby, my life would be so fair.
Yeah, it does sound better without the ND. Yes, it's interesting trying to work out what is the best arrangement with these. Mix and match. Go through the pile and see what else is here. What other options? Oh, here we go. Here's something that's a bit subversive. I had listened to this before, and it is a little bit outrageous. In fact, if you're easily offended by subversive topics, and there's a bit of a Viagra undertone to this record, well, here are a Wallace original. This is Ruth Wallace in one of her characterful songs, VK3SL.
I married a millionaire. He was 50 years older, but I didn't care. I dreamed of the great romance it would be. Well, it just goes to show you how wrong I can be. What good's the mink and diamond rings? I miss those other things. It's been a long, long time. Every time I want a thrill, he takes another pill. It takes a long, long time. I fell for him because he was so handsome. His name was Simpson. I thought he said Samson. I trade the hold-on works today for just one good substantial. Hey, hey, it's been a long, long time. He puts on those purple pajamas and he sprinkles himself with touche. I watch that poor fella preparing for a part that he never will play. He just brought me a string of pearls. I hope he ate the oysters, girls. It's been a long, long time. He bought me a yacht, it's shiny and new. I hope it's got a healthy crew. It's been a long, long time. At night he takes me to the opera or the ballet. And all the while I'm dreaming of a matinee. The days are long, the nights are longer. Golly, I wish that he was stronger. It's been a long, long time. I watch him burning the incense and turning down all of the lights. Always a dress rehearsal and never an opening night. I always knew I wasn't getting Gregory Peck, but still I didn't think he'd be a physical wreck. So girls, if you marry an old buckaroo, when you retire, take a book or two, 'cause till he gets good and ready for you, you can finish the book. It'll be such a long, long time.
The inimitable Ruth Wallace and her orchestra. One of her own, she had her own label. She must have had quite a following, Ms. Wallace. And that's one was in the pile. Okay, well, we will go OTR, I think, at this point. I think we will, yes. And we've got here something from, there's another major OTR archive, which I haven't even really looked at much. Well, I have looked at a lot, but I've never really explored it in this setting, and that's the crossband radio archive. So we will find something from the unsorted files, and we'll see what happens. Something that's a bit ABC oriented, I think. So let's give this a go. This is OTR session. This is VK3SL testing. Hopefully this will work. If we get a follow on, and if I fade things up, I've got to push the button first. There we go.
This morning, about 800 young men and other national service intake. They were then taken to the Puckapunyal Army Camp to begin their training. Tomorrow, they'll be joined by 365 young men from Western Australia and Tasmania. In barracks in Melbourne this morning, about 40 people took part in an anti-conscription demonstration. The demonstrators tried to get through the main gate, but were held back by police. The next ABC News will be at 4 o'clock from 3AR and Regionals.
ABC Radio from 3AR, the regionals and shortwave station VLH. It's 1:45. Look at this afternoon's programmes. 10 minutes past 2, we have our schools broadcast Learn Indonesian, and at 2:30 Once Upon a Time. 2:45, the invitation to Let's Join In. 3 o'clock, Concert Hour. And this afternoon we're featuring the work of the Queensland by Juan Matucci. News at 4, the United report at 5 minutes past 4, at 4:15, BBC Newsreel. 4:30, Young World, and at 5 o'clock, Roundabout with Tony Lee. Stock Exchange at quarter to 6, and at 6 o'clock, Evening Music. News commentary at 5 minutes to 7, and at 7 we have our national news. An Opinion continues its Heritage series, looking tonight at the High Country, the Snowy Mountains region of New South Wales. I was first attracted to the area some years ago as a bushwalker and skier. But the High Country, he notes, is still a mecca for sportsmen and tourists, and to look at its future through conservation. Tonight, in Fact and Opinion, find out what's happening in the High Country, part of your heritage. It's on 3AR at 8:15 tonight.
Isn't that fantastic? I love it. I love the little potpourri snapshots like that. And isn't it exciting? Wasn't ABC exciting? Wasn't it riveting? Riveting radio. So dynamic, so impulsive, so full of verve. Oh, it's just so compelling. But that was reality. That's what that's the world of the ABC. 3AR in all its glory. Complete with the studio resonance, no doubt, using a STC 4021 ball and biscuit microphone, and that is excellent. That's the sort of ambience I like. Snapshots of the real world. Good OTR fodder. So there's a lot more where that came from, so we'll have to keep that archive well in our midst. Now, the subject is interesting. It's about some international performers who were active in Melbourne in the 1940s and 50s. In fact, more the 50s. And it's one of those great emigration stories. So we're hoping to listen to a fabulous fiddle player called Gizi Royko, and her real name was Gizi Royko. And she came out to Australia in 1950 and settled in Mildura in a camp, in one of those settlers camps for new immigrants. And And there's a fantastic story about her in the camp, arriving and washing dishes and being so happy to be in Australia. But she brought with her this extraordinary heritage. She was a gypsy musician, a fiddle player, and she concertized all over Europe. And her story is immense. And she arrived in Australia hoping to set herself up for a new life, and shortly after arriving formed a Hungarian gypsy orchestra and produced a really, really authentic sound. It's absolutely amazing. Now, the story is that this record has eluded me for a very long time. It's almost impossible to find. And this recording made for Spotlight Limited release. And lo and behold, I was in a second-hand shop, in an op shop during the week on the way home from work. I always poke my nose in these places just in case. Well, it was very much worthwhile, because staring me in the face was Gizi Royko's Evening in Budapest, a record made in 1953 for Cyril Stevens out at Spotlight. And the record is amazing. It has blown my mind. In fact, I just can't believe what I'm hearing. And I've put it straight up onto YouTube, and I'm trying to sort of flesh out the story, because it stops cold after this recording was made. We don't know what happened to her. But we'll sort of fill in a few more details as we go. So let's have a listen to this extraordinary artist and her cohort, her group of musicians, her band. And the only one we know about is the double bass player. The others have all sort of disappeared into obscurity, so we're hoping something may emerge in time. This is VK3SL. We're testing on 160 and 2 meters, and also streaming online. You can check that out. It's easy to find. Just look up my call sign on qrz.com. Then there's links and stuff. Anyhow, let's have a listen to Gizi Royko and her orchestra, recorded in Melbourne. VK3SL. Right, there we have it. That was the music of Gizi Royko. That's her own arrangement, and a band of musicians formed by her and recorded for Spotlight Records in 1953. And it's quite amazing stuff. It's very authentic, and it's music from Eastern Europe. And they don't have the dulcimer or the cembalo. They use a guitar instead of that, so there's one little compromise. But I think the sound, the textures, the life in the music is very much a Eastern Europe phenomenon. And it's one of those great sort of untold immigration stories, reading about her life, how they arrived in Australia, and the situation was dire for that family. It was just appalling. They were interned. The father, the husband, that's Jules Zoldesi, and he's playing clarinet on that recording. He was interned, or he was in a concentration camp for 3 years and survived the ordeal. And the family were broken up and had a very difficult circumstances during the war, and then were displaced again once the Russians started to move into Hungary. So yeah, there's it's a story of tragedy really, until they arrived in Australia, and then they were very thankful, and they wanted to change their name. That might be one of the reasons why I'm having trouble tracing them. There's no mention of Royko or there's little mention of Zoldesi. There's a family in Blackburn, Zoldesi family. We're looking into that to see if there's any direct connection, hoping there is. Their kids would still be around, possibly. They had 2 children, and they were born in the late 30s, early 40s, so there's a good chance that they're around. But the most amazing thing is that she was a consummate musician, amazing player. I mean, just so in touch with her craft and her voice, yet there's no sort of obvious, there's nothing obvious of her performing in Melbourne or in any, there's no mention of her or her band in newspapers and things. So we'll have to tease this one out, work out what the full brief is with Gizi Royko. And she was also a tap dancer, so she's one of these sort of multi-level artists. But the story is she had a Lupo violin, which would be probably worth $1 million today. It's like the French Stradivarius, and that's the only thing that they brought out to Australia with them. So the story goes. Anyhow, we are listening to examples of great music from Budapest, or from Gypsy music from Eastern Europe, and as recorded in Melbourne. Quite well recorded too, I have to say. Mr. Stevens did a great job. It's very sort of bass heavy, but that sort of characterises it well, I think. So let's continue. Let's listen to another track. This is VK3SL testing. We've been listening to the music of Gizi Royko, or Gisela Zoldesi was her married name. A gypsy fiddle player who ended up in Australia. And it's one of those great human interest stories, and it hasn't been told, I don't think. You know, I'm hoping someone takes up the story and finds out what happened to her. There's one article in the Argus from 1950, and it sort of fleshes the picture out, and it says that Gisela Zoldesi, one of Europe's most famous violinists, is the happiest wife in Mildura's migrant centre. Just going to push the speech button on the compressor there, so make things better. Let's see what else it says. It says, she said yesterday, as she went busily about her duties as waitress in the camp, "To work here is not a punishment, it is a privilege," she said. The dark-haired Hungarian violinist, her husband Jules, who also works in the camp, and their 2 children are all at Mildura. It says the whole family are happier than they've been for the past 11 years. It says, yesterday the family tried to explain their pleasure at being in Australia, and Gisela said, "It is like the end of a fairy story. It is a beautiful, peaceful country," she said. "Long ago, while I was giving recitals in Italy, I went to a church in Padua and made 3 wishes. A wish for a husband, for a fair-headed daughter, and for a small home of my own. I didn't wish for anything about music, because there weren't any wishes to spare. I could only have 3. VK3SL testing. Listen to Gypsy Airs, played by Gizi Royko and her Continental Orchestra, recorded for Spotlight in Melbourne, in Thornbury, in 1953. So there's another reference to her. There's one other reference, and it's quite interesting. This is about the Cyril Stevens studio, and he actually mentions this recording. And I'll read a little bit here because it's quite a story in itself. It's an aside, but it sort of paints a picture. And it says, a 22-year-old man may have caught 3D sound, it says. The nearest yet to third-dimensional sound has been produced by a novel recording studio at Thornbury, I think. The new sound has been achieved on Spotlight Microgroove Records, or Microgroove Records, it says, produced at the Cyril Stevens Recording Studios. And it says the only commercial studio in Melbourne where artists' voices or instrumental sounds go into a microphone and come out the other end on microgroove recordings. Don't know if that's actually true, but yeah. The studio recently released its first super sound recording, featuring well-known artist Gizi Royko and her Continental Orchestra. That's the record we've been listening to. And Mr. Alan Stevens, 22-year-old son of Mr. Cyril Stevens, claims that he is the first in Australia to have stumbled across the secret of super sound. The idea is still in its infancy in America. Yesterday, in his ultra-modern studio, Alan played the new Gizi Royko record on a standard record player. There is little doubt that the discovery opens up the possibility of new joy for thousands of record fans. Compared with the orthodox overseas recordings which Alan played later, the new super sound has something which is exciting and disturbingly realistic. More than once, I had to pinch myself to remove the impression that Gizi Royko was actually in the studio playing for me in person. Well, I think it's something about the playing. I think no matter how that was recorded, that would sound like she's in the room. She's such a vibrant musician. But yes, interesting point. According to Alan's, super sound is the compromise between microgroove and third-dimensional sound. It is more feasible and workable than third-dimensional sound, he claims, because it is produced on standard microgroove equipment on sale to the public. Third-dimensional sound would be out of the reach of many people because of the heavy cost of equipment. He said that nearly every existing radiogram component would have to be duplicated to produce third-dimensional sound. I think he's referring to stereo. Imagine the cost of having 2 pickups, 2 amplifiers and 2 separate speakers. Oh my God. Mr. William Flynn, the studio's musical director, who was formerly conductor of a Melbourne radio orchestra, said, "The new sound will give much more joy to people who appreciate finer music. It can provide the lowest bass tones audible to the ear. The actual recording for super sound is no different from that of orthodox sound. The secret lies in the cutting of the master disc from which the records are finally produced." Mr. Cyril Stevens claims that his studio produced the first all-Australian microgroove recording using Australian artists, technicians and composition. He still marvels how he managed to link with the microgroove recording. About 4 or 5 years ago, when I heard the first microgroove recording, I doubted whether we would ever develop the technique, and now Alan has taken it a step further. There we go. Say no more. This is VK3SL. We're testing and waxing lyrical in super sound. There we go. Super sound recording of Gizi Royko and her Continental Orchestra recorded for Spotlight. And doing a bit of a feature on Gizi Royko because I found the record this week. I've known of its existence for a long time and never thought I'd find a copy. And there it was on the shelf for $1. Cost me $1. And within 24 hours it was up on YouTube because I'm just so keen to get the message out there, and hopefully people can connect with that, and we might be able to find a bit more about her, what happened. And the story continues here in this one article. It says the war brought great hardship to the family, and Jules Zoldesi spent 3 years behind barbed wire in a German concentration camp. He remembers it vividly. An American sergeant in a jeep came to the camp on May the 5th, 1945, and he told us we were free. I weighed 72 pounds then. I didn't know whether Gizi was alive or dead, and months afterwards I got back to Budapest and I saw my daughter run past me in the street and I knew her. Then I saw my wife. She ran to me calling out, "Eva, Eva, father's come back." After the war, the Zoldesis formed a 20-piece Hungarian orchestra and toured Northern Europe. They gave recitals in 119 cities. Then Hungary came into the Soviet orbit. And scrolling down, and they were ordered to return. Jules Zoldesi said the others had to go back, but my wife and my family were with me and we stayed. We sought refuge in Switzerland. They spent every penny they had and faced further hardships rather than part with Gisella's French Lupo violin, which they could have sold for more than £1,000, would be worth nearly $1 million now, a Lupo. Jules added, "It was not for the money. We do not want to get rich. Perhaps we would not, even if we wanted to. We kept the violin to bring here. Now it's in Australia with us." And that's a success story. It says the family reached Victoria a little over 3 months ago. Jules Zoldesi said, "We have been working only 2 months, but we have already saved the money for a deposit on this fine piano." And he indicated the instrument which held pride of place in the family's tiny apartment at the camp. He placed his hand on it and said proudly, "It is a very good piano." Gisela Zoldesi answered with an emphatic no when she was asked if her work as a waitress would spoil her hands for violin playing. "I must practice 2 hours a day," she said, "and there is no danger." Both parents were intensely proud of their 2 children. It goes on and on. Their mother said, "Eva is talented, blah, 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 blah." Talks about their kids. And what else does it say? Oh yes. Jules Zoldesi summoned up all his linguistic ability, because apparently he could speak 10 languages, something it says earlier on. And for one brilliant final effort, he said, "We will make our kids," wait for it, "dinkum Aussies," they say. Well, say no more. Right, there we go. That was our little special on the music. We'll fade this at this point. And the music of Gizi Royko and her Continental Orchestra. And it's a great Australian immigration story, and she was an incredible musician, and I'd like to know more about what happened to her, because she just seems to evaporate after that recording was made. So there must be more information out there, so hopefully that will come about. Now, the only other musician on that recording who we'd known to have recorded or had a sort of a prominence was Andre Schuster, who is the bass player. Now, Mr. Fleming kindly dropped in a CD he dubbed off a 7-inch Planet record featuring the exotic rhythms of Mr. Schuster and his ensemble, recording for Marcus Herman, also in the mid-50s. So we'll play a bit of this. I've only got my fingers crossed here with this CD player. I had it queued up before, and then suddenly it wouldn't start, but I'm trying CD player number 2. Fingers crossed. All right, let's see what happens. VK3SL, and we're now channeling Andre Schuster and his exotic rhythms. Right, there we go. That was a recording of Andre Schuster and his ensemble, Exotic Rhythms. And we don't know much about who else is in that group, although Billy Hyde might be on percussion. He's in percussion, some of them, possibly, in that recording. So, yeah, a bit of Melbourne history there. So, milking the archives a bit today, listening to records made post-war, early microgroove records made in Melbourne, and with a exotic tinge. Well, we're sort of going to move into a bit of a darker, more, foreboding space, I suppose, now, and continue looking at the music of Daphne Oram at the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. Daphne was there before Delia Derbyshire, and she's one of the originators of the workshop. She helped set it up. But she's did amazing things. Her creations are so out there, and she was really quite a maverick, possibly more than anybody else in her generation. And her material is becoming more and more accessible, which is a good thing. And I've been listening to some of it, and it's quite incredible. It sounds great on the big RCA speaks. Sounds amazing. So yeah, look, sit back and let this take you somewhere. It's pretty sort of weird and wonderful and bizarre, and a lot of them, it's like a potpourri or an amalgam of different sound worlds that she's from, mostly from radio productions, which have been reassembled here. So there's a whole stack of different subjects. So rather than try and stop and start and identify them, I think I'll just play them through and see how it presents as an entity. They sort of flow, so I think it's okay. So yeah, see what we think. We'll have a bit of a Daphne experience. We had a couple of weeks ago, did a thing on Sunday afternoon, played a doco, BBC doco on her life, and she had this Oramics machine, which is a way of conveying through written forms musical lines. It was a very sort of immediate way of writing electronic music. She formulated her own language, her own nomenclature. So that was pretty out there. Anyhow, let's have a listen and let this take you into some weird, bizarre place that certainly captures my imagination. This is VK3SL, and we are testing, of course.
The Oramics studio is in Kent, in a converted oast house, only some 28 miles or so from Piccadilly Circus. I'm Daphne Oram, the director of the studio, and I'd rather like to introduce you to some of the very varied sort of soundtracks which are produced at my studio. Here's a track for a commercial about power tools, pneumatic drills and saws and spray guns, etc. The real sounds of the tools are here electronically treated and mixed with some rather light-hearted electronic music, which I specially composed to fit them.
This is VK3SL. We've been testing on 160 and 2 meters in the narrowband FM mode, listening to the music of Daphne Oram. And she was one of the very first to sample concrete sounds, environmental sounds, and intersperse them and create these pastiches. And it's been a recently discovered work of hers, which was performed at, I think, at the London Proms a couple of years ago. It was a work she wrote for double orchestra and 4 turntables, but wait for it, back in 1949. So she had this grand vision of sampling and creating these sort of mixes very early on. So in many ways she's a trailblazer, and the more I read about Daphne Oram, the more I'm fascinated by her insights and her fortitude. She's amazing. So we'll play more of that, I think. I'm quite that was great to sort of sit back and hear those sound worlds come and go. Yay. Now what I might do is, I've got 3 microphones in front of me here, and there might be 1 or 2 people listening and might be able to offer me a little bit of feedback here. Now, on this compressor, there is a, let me have a look. Yeah, there's a speech button. I can push the speech button now. There we go. It's on speech now. It's on music before. If I remember, I can switch between the 2. So this may or may not be a better setting. So I'm on speech, and I'm using the SM58, which is the microphone I usually use for these missions. It's an SM58, just a cardioid dynamic mic. Maybe picking up a bit of extra noise with the compressor going, but that's the one. But look, I've also got an SM57 here, which is much the same as an SM7, but with a little transformer. But let's have a listen to that now, and I'm interested if people have any thoughts about what works, what sort of synergy any of these mics may have with the compressor. This is a bit of navel gazing, I'm afraid, folks, so excuse it. So we'll switch over now to the SM7. Okay, we are now testing with the hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, SM7, different microphonics, and we've got Daphne still going in the background. I have to switch her off. So that's the SM7. May or may, it sounds a bit muffle missions-ish in my ears, so maybe it's not such a good option. And I'll switch over now to the Rode, which is a condenser mic. It's the one I used to use. We'll see if this one works. Hello, test 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the battery's probably a bit flat in this one. Should have more output than that. Not to worry, but that's the Rode M something, I think it is. So there we go, 3 microphonics, and I'll go back to the SM58. Back to the SM58. I think it sounds stronger, and I think it's the one to use, but I thought it was a worthwhile test anyhow. So there we go. Now, I was going to play some Bach, and I've got all these sets, you see. I've got sets and sets of 78s here, and whole works and symphonies and operas and things, and there's a bit of a practical issue about playing sets because you've got to turn the record over all the time. But I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to have them on the shelves, I might as well use them and experience it. So I thought I'd just play a movement of one of my fave Bach concertos, and I just stumbled on the set the other day, and I'll just play 2 sides. I won't play more than that, but it is from an existing set, and it's the concerto for, well, it's a reconstruction of a harpsichord concerto. It's the only way it exists now, but originally Bach wrote it probably for violin, and that original version's been lost. Now, the work was reconstructed by Joseph Szigeti back in the 1940s, and he recorded it at that time. So it's sort of a reconstruction of a reconstruction, if that makes sense. So it's BWV 1052, and we often hear it as a harpsichord concerto or as a piano concerto, and we've played it on these missions quite a few times. Mindu Cats, I think, is one version which was particularly well received. Anyhow, we'll go and have a listen to this one now with Mr. Szigeti, and this sort of fits this Eastern European theme because Szigeti was Hungarian, Romanian. In fact, I did a bit of a pilgrimage to his village, Sighetu Maramuresh in Romania, which is now in Romania, was in Hungary, and that's where Mr. Szigeti took his name and where he was born, apparently. So that's the story of Mr. Szigeti. Wonderful fiddle player and noble spirit, and this playing has just got such a yearning quality to it, and it's full of expat Jewish musicians who recorded just after the war, and the energy and the intent and the setting is beyond compelling. Okay, right, we'll get this going. I think I've got the processor on, and we'll see what you think. 2 sides with a bit of a flip in the middle. This is Bach, the first movement of Bach's Concerto for Violin and Orchestra, BWV 1052. There we go. That was Mr. Bark, played by Joseph Szigeti. Such a vibrant performance of the work. It's so urgent and so determined. Yes. So that was one on the shelf. I hadn't seen that for a long time, and it just suddenly jumped out the other day. So it was worth playing. Well, folks, I'm going to start winding. I'm pretty tired tonight. It's been a big week. Yeah, in Kumul last weekend. Came back very late Sunday and then sort of had to get straight back into it all. And it's been a bit frantic, to say the least. But I'm enjoying being back at the helm, I suppose. I sort of... when I first came back, I didn't really want to even go into this room. It seemed a bit daunting. I thought, oh, so much stuff. It's easier being a free spirit and just going to places and travelling and not thinking about stuff. And unfortunately, there is a lot of stuff in here, and sometimes that is a reality that can be a bit overwhelming. Anyhow, such are the pathologies. Rightio. Well, we're sort of winding up. What was I going to do? I think I will finish with another recording of Miss Royko, the gypsy fiddle player. Now, where is she? There is a recording of hers here lined up, and I think it's a good one to finish with. It's very atmospheric. I'll listen back on D, have a bit of a chat if anyone's there, and we will probably be back again next week. I think the audio processing's okay. I'll get used to manipulating the speech. I see I'm on the music setting now, but if I push the speech setting, there we go, speech is on, it'll probably have a slightly different character. So, because it's got a dual band compressor, and the crossover changes depending whether you have it on music or speech. So it's on speech at the moment, but I'll switch it across to music shortly because we're going to have some music to finish. So I say cheers for now. Have a good week, everyone. And we're right to go. I think it's all set up and ready. So VK3SL, wishing the listener a very good week.